They say some ships never return from their voyages, yet keep sailing in seas that don't exist on any map. It's me, and here's the terrible story of the ghost liner Eternis. Once upon a time, the internet was full of ads for a cruise, an incredible voyage organized by a travel agency called Beyond Dreams. It promised you a vacation on a 5-star liner, a chance to see amazing places and enjoy luxury service. All of this could be yours for just $75. Yes, you heard right, $75 for a 7-day cruise. You have to agree that this was suspicious. And the reviews on the website were also pretty strange. Most of them were left by people who claimed to have been on this cruise, and they said that their lives had changed after that trip forever. It was like they were possessed by something. A young married couple, Daniel and Emily, came across that advertisement. They looked at each other and smiled. It felt like fate. Their modest salaries barely made ends meet. But they dreamed of a great adventure together, so they booked a ticket without even telling their parents. They packed their bags and went to the port in the evening, shivering with excitement. The ship called Polaris awaited them there. It was an enormous liner, but it wasn't like those that can be seen in glossy magazines. The Polaris looked ancient, though it wasn't clear why. It was big and white, but it somehow seemed dirty. The couple walked along the pier looking for other tourists, but there were none. No excited children, no romantic couples, no partying youth. The parking lot near the pier was also empty. This was weird. Where were the guests? What about the crew? There wasn't a single person anywhere. A tall, skinny man approached them. He was dressed in an old steward's uniform, pale and hollow-eyed. He took their tickets without saying a word, then stared at them for a moment. "Welcome aboard," he finally whispered. His voice was hoarse, like sandpaper. They exchanged glances, but Daniel decided not to give in to his growing anxiety. Maybe the other guests would show up soon. When they stepped onto the ship, it became clear that there were no passengers or crew on board. The captain's log was also missing. Everything was completely silent. The wind howled outside, but inside the liner there was not a single sound. The only thing that betrayed the life that used to be here were the tables set for dinner and candles lit in the dining room. It seemed like the ship was waiting for its guests, but they would never come. Daniel and Emily felt uneasy. It was probably best to get out of there, but the door to the entrance was locked. They started exploring the ship. Its size became clear only when they reached the pool. It turned out that the liner was 3 stories high and nearly 200 meters long. It was truly huge. They spent the whole day looking around, finding nothing but emptiness. By the evening, they were already scared. The rooms they were staying in were starting to look more like prison cells than hotel suites. Suddenly, Emily grabbed Daniel's hand and pulled him into the corridor. She whispered excitedly, "Do you hear that? It's music. A waltz." They crept closer to the source of the sounds, hiding behind the corners of the walls. The music grew louder and clearer, and they began to make out the silhouettes of men and women dancing in the ballroom ahead. There must have been about 30 couples. All of them were dressed in old-fashioned gowns and top hats. Some of the ladies wore dresses like those from the 18th century. The men had obviously once been handsome, but now they were stiffly moving their pale, shriveled hands, their posture unnatural, frozen. They didn't seem to notice anything around them. They weren't dancing to the music. It was like they were performing some kind of ritual. Emily and Daniel stood frozen, watching them. Then they noticed that their eyes were bottomless. They were empty. No, there wasn't anyone behind that black abyss. There were no eyes there at all. Suddenly, a woman in a luxurious pink dress approached them. Her face was covered with wrinkles. One could hardly tell whether she was 40 or 80 years old. Her lips twisted into a smile and she extended her arm towards them. "Would you like to dance?" she asked in a raspy voice. But before Daniel could answer, the music abruptly stopped. The guests froze in their places, not even trying to pretend that they continued dancing. They remained motionless, their faces suddenly turning white as snow. Emily grabbed Daniel and ran away. The pale woman didn't follow them. When they peeked into the hall again, the guests were gone. The music stopped. The candles went out. It was as if the hall had just been emptied and the guests had never been there at all. However, when they touched the wall, it was warm. The heat coming off the stone made it clear that the guests had been real. But where did they disappear to? And where were the crew members who was living on this abandoned ship? They wandered around, scared, until they found a library. And there in the corner, half hidden under a pile of books, was a logbook. Daniel wiped the dust off the cover. It said Eternis, the ship's name, in 1953, the year of its last voyage. This is when the ghost liner disappeared with all of its passengers and crew. And the last entry in the log was made by the captain. It read, "Today we picked up new guests. No one will leave the ship." Daniel and Emily were horrified. It meant that the people they saw in the ballroom were the same passengers who had boarded this ship almost 70 years ago and were doomed to sail on it forever. The couple didn't want to spend the night alone on this ship. They searched for a lifeboat, but there wasn't a single one. The ship really existed, but it was stuck between the worlds of the living and the dead. In the morning, they found traces of a feast in the dining room. Instead of food, which had probably gone bad long ago, there was a thick black liquid in the dishes. Emily dropped the spoon in horror. It glistened like oil. Daniel didn't know what to do. He tried to smash the window, but it was strong glass and his hands quickly bled. Then they remembered the ballroom and ran there, and guess what? The tables were again filled with guests. Passengers, sailors, women in torn ball gowns sat around them. They were the same people whom Daniel and Emily had seen the day before. Now they were even closer. The men held out their arms, inviting them to dance. The women smiled, revealing yellow teeth. The faces of the guests were blurred, like old photographs. Their eyes were still empty sockets. Then the pale steward approached the couple. He looked happy. "Welcome to our eternal celebration," he said. He offered them glasses filled with that same thick black liquid. Daniel shook his head, but the steward insisted, "Please, our dear guests, we won't let you leave. You belong to us now." He grabbed them by the shoulders, and for a moment Daniel thought the man would tear them apart. But instead, the steward lowered his head and whispered in Daniel's ear, "We're so glad you joined us. Don't you understand? You're free from your boring life now. You can be whoever you want. Look around. Here you'll always be welcome. You're finally among your own." Emily burst into tears. She wanted to go home, no matter how difficult her life was. But the ship seemed to be sucking her in. Its halls shifted and changed. Rooms appeared where there were none before. The ship was alive. It wanted them. It drew them in, offering them false promises. The liner wanted to be full again, and it would stop at nothing to achieve that. Daniel knew they couldn't stay there. In the morning, when the sun rose, they decided to escape. They jumped into the sea. The water wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was sticky and smelled like decay. The air was filled with the stench of rotten eggs. They struggled in the viscous darkness, but after a while, they stopped fighting. The ocean around them hardened like tar, and when Daniel turned to Emily, he saw that she was dissolving in that black mass. Then the steward leaned over her and whispered, "Welcome home." The ghost liner disappeared into the mist, waiting for the next couple, who would think a cheap ticket is just good luck. All of us live among ghosts. There are relatives who died before us, and those strangers who met unfortunate ends, the victims of crimes and suicides, and even the people we killed ourselves. The ghost liner doesn't choose its passengers. It welcomes everyone equally. Write in the comments, would you take a chance and sail on the ghost liner if you were promised $75 for a 7-day trip? And that's all for today. See you next time. Bye.